Dr. Mohammed Osman, advisor to the President of Somalia and a member of the National Economic Council and a regional representative of the University for Peace. Man of many hats. Welcome to ANEws.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much indeed for this opportunity. So let's talk about this forum, which is drawing to an end. It's effectively last day. The platform, the Global South NGO platform, has been established. The working document was adopted yesterday. There'll be 1 year interim period, and today 10 memorandums of understanding have been signed. What is your feeling about what is happening in Baku today? Do you think does it look like the inception of something very, very important and big?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and I'm also excited to be for the first time in Azerbaijan and in Baku. Though I had a couple of opportunities to come, but this was actually very attractive to me. And we can say what happened yesterday, 28th and 29th today, of April, was actually phenomenal in terms of the way development and global development and multilateralism has been considered. We have seen the great convening capacity of Azerbaijan after the COP, and then followed by the non-aligned movement, and then we have this NGO platform established. So I think it's such great. I see a great convening power of this global South as a country, which is actually an active country in that context. But also I see the enthusiasm of the Global South NGOs, who are really looking that they had a private time to really talk about their matters and have a deep discussion and deep dialogue. That's what led into having so many MOUs signed, and which I also from the university side, we were also looking into actually supporting this initiative in terms of capacity building, strengthening leadership capacity of the Global South NGOs. One of the remarkable things, we need to always think about is that how would the global NGOs deliver services to the people and contribute? And that needs leadership skills, it needs financial management skills, it needs operational skills, it needs governance skills, it needs many skills.
But quite often what we noticed in some countries, not in all countries of course, you see NGO leaders eventually becoming government officials. So they come from NGO background and eventually emerge as government actors, officials. Do you think it's a good thing, or there are two schools of thought? One is that a person should be bred in state tradition from the very beginning. Sort of the second tradition is that he may come to the state domain at a later stage. Of course, we're not here to choose between the two versions. But what's your general evaluation of this, particularly bearing in mind that you advise as the president of Somalia?
Thank you so much. I think it goes back to the individual aspirations, and rather than the constituencies where politicians come from. There are so many constituencies that feed into political system. People come from art, they come from private sector. A lot of rich guys end up into being presidents, academia also, a lot of professors, we end up having them as presidents or ministers, So I think it goes back to the individual aspirations. Some of the people who might have leadership aspiration or political aspiration might really have the NGOs as a platform where they can have access. And also the experience of working in an NGO makes you really think what you can do outside of the or scaling up. As an NGO, you are limited by many things, by resource, by legal constraints. So when the person is exposed to dealing with public health issues and roads and safety and education, he might have a second thought and say, okay, what if I go to maybe a higher level of political influence, a higher level of decision making and resource allocation? I can really do a better job. So I think somehow the nature of NGOs makes some people with leadership attributes to be able to really rethink and say, okay, I think President Obama is a good example of in the US, where he was a civil rights advocate, and he was, and then that led him to join the Senate, the legislative of the state, and then later Congress, later president. So Same thing comes to a lot of people. I think I was born in Somalia, I grew up in Somalia, and I have worked as a young man, and I'm still a young man, but the age bracket is actually moving faster. Yeah. But I have seen the suffering during the war, and we have been active in peace making and peace building. And as youth, we've established platforms, we established dialogue, we challenged, we challenged the warlords and the political parties, and that's what led Somalia to really. From different angles, not only youth, the women, business people, academia, media was a big component of Somalia's recovery from the war. So I think it goes back to the individual aspirations, and I think NGOs make good leaders if they are organized in a good way. If the NGOs have good governance, good financial management, good operations, good service delivery, they can give the best leaders who can become political leaders. Yeah, one of the streams that can.
Yeah, one of the streams, not the only stream.
Not the only stream.
Okay,
yes.
Naturally. Andy, you just mentioned earlier that you're born and bred in Somalia, and you mentioned about civil war. To what extent today Somalia is a nation which could be truly and genuinely classified as an economic gateway of Africa, and what is the self-perception of the nation? And what is the role, what is the contribution of this self-perception to the general notion of Global South?
Perfect. I think the geography has favored for Somalia dramatically. Somalia being on the Horn of Africa, on the intersection of the Arabian Sea or Red Sea and the Indian Ocean Sea, and having neighbors which are landlocked across the Horn of Africa to Central Asia. I think that gives Somalia a geographical comparative advantage, and to be a gateway for economic development. But of course, as you said, Somalia had a protracted conflict since 1990s, early 1990s, when the state collapsed. And we have to really rebuild the state from scratch. I mean, the entire government, the entire state disappeared. And a lot of people lost their lives. It's very painful in our history. We lost a lot of loved ones. But of course, it was not only pain, but also it was a gain in terms of experience and state building. We went back to the roots. We've built from bottom to up. And the current governance structure we have is something we've made by ourselves with the support of our African and international colleagues. Of course, Turkey was one of the main, and Azerbaijan has just joined. I saw that our president was here in Baku in February, have signed many deals with the Azerbaijan government. And so we have went through a tough time of total collapse of system, total shutdown of the government services and state services, to where we are now having the government at state level. The governments are offering services at federal level, offering services. We're having rebuilding our army, our security sector, our social sector is becoming, and now we're really joining the global fossil fuel industry, though we hope will be the most responsible to be. So we see our recovery connecting to the geography we have, yeah, and the collective experience of the Somalis from diaspora. Somalis have traveled all over the world, and they got all the nationalities of all over the world. We hope that we could be a hub, a gateway in terms of infrastructure to connect the rich Africa in the central and in the East Africa to the rest of the world, Asia.
If you go back to the roots of the concept of Global South, we will find ourselves in the realm of non-aligned movement. That was the reaction to the collapse of the European colonial empires, of course. And there is something many people would say anti-Western in the inception of the movement, of course, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's anti-Western in the sense that it wants to dominate the West or finds it as its eternal adversary. But it's about the historical context, and the context is still there. But this movement has moved a lot, changed a lot, and now Global South is more universal. If you go back to the Bandung principles or Buenos Aires Action Plan, the principles are purely universal, and they cannot be deemed as anti-Western or anything like that. But today's Global South, when you look at these NGOs gathered here in Baku, and when you examine the statements made by them, do you think it's all about actually building a more coherent, cohesive world, not to reinforce the existing distinction between two parts of the world, global north and global south?
That's a very good question, and I think that just to connect on the global south and Somalia. Somalia was one of the actually early members of the non-aligned movement, and of course, at the time of the inception of the non-aligned movement was actually more of the right to sovereignty, of the nations, and coming from colonial, colonization. I think of many European and non-European, countries colonizing Africa and other parts of the world. But of course, we've moved from that era. And now we've moved into an era where, non-alignment now has to be redefined, and because we have now all the countries except few territories are under colonial, under colonial, still remain colonial subjects. The office of the UN for colonial stuff have been closed. I mean, many. We've moved on. I think we're now facing new challenges, and I agree with you that it shouldn't be the global south a new focus on making a new block or a new division or a new demarcation of the divisions we already have. We already had the socialist world and the communist and the capitalist world. We had East and West. We had Warsaw and NATO. Kind of that. Of course, what's coming from Baku is not focusing that division. Baku approach is totally different. It's actually looking the majority of the world being in the global south, and also it also takes inspiration and welcomes the like-minded from the north. So it doesn't mean when we are talking about global south, NGOs here in Baku, it doesn't mean necessarily that we are forgetting the north. There's so many like-minded and countries, ideas, values, with the south that are part of us. So it's a more cohesive, and why the name has been chosen could be discussed, but to me I see is a way to have visibility. I mean, you cannot call yourself the global. We cannot call ourselves global. We have to really identify ourselves as the south community of the global. But we have a lot of friends from the north which are really agreeing and supporting what we are doing and what is happening in Azerbaijan.
Dr. Mohammed Osman, thank you very much indeed for this.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely phenomenal, fantastic opportunity to converse on a wide range of issues, not just about the global south, not just about this platform that has been established here in Azerbaijan, but also wider issues of geopolitical nature. So grateful.
Grateful, thank you. Thank you.